really.
So this is for our people watching remotely, so that's why we're doing it. All right, ready? All right. Welcome, everybody. We're excited to have our guests here and our students, and above all, we're very excited to have our guest, Garrett Guevara, here. He's one of our star students, graduates from the Tech Academy, and we're very excited to hear what his experience has been. It's Zapproved, great company here in Portland, and I'll just leave you to talk about it. So thank you, Garrett, for coming.
Thanks.
So I don't really want this to be a lecture, like this should be a back and forth dialogue, so I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm going to say. I'm going to tell you just some of my story, how I got to where I am today, some advice that I wish I could tell myself roughly 8 months ago, and then I'd just like to open the floor and have a discussion with you guys and what's most useful for you to talk about.
So I am a software developer that's approved.
A little bit about me. I was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. I don't look like it, but this is a redneck back here. I earned 2 degrees from the University of Alabama, English and Spanish. I didn't find them to be extremely useful on the job market. Worked in a few fields. I originally moved out here to work in wealth management, so I was doing inside sales for a finance company. Not for me, dialing the phone 300 times a day. So I moved into education where my degree seemed to fit. I actually liked that a lot, but it still wasn't the right fit. And that's when I decided to come look into the Tech Academy. I graduated here in March of this year, and then I got hired about 2 months later in May. All right, so how did I get into software development? So I was pretty lucky. 2 of my close friends are actually senior software developers, and they've been trying to convince me for a long time that I need to just drop what I'm doing and join tech because it's fun and exciting constantly. So they helped me make the transition and research and actually pick out the Tech Academy, which seemed like the best fit for me, being self-paced. So I came here, I started in early October 2016 and worked my way through. That was great. Afterwards, I graduated and was sort of kind of on the cusp of like, well, what's next? What do I do? And I was fortunate enough to get to work with Adam and several other students here on a project that let us work together, share some knowledge, get some experience working on a more complicated project than just my own. All right, so my job hunt. Right after that, I had a pretty short job hunt. I got pretty fortunate, but I still think what I learned is indicative of how we should approach it. I sent out roughly 10 applications. None of them responded. I knew a few people here. Actually, one of my coworkers, Aaron, had just interviewed with Zapproved and got an offer, and he recommended me, and that was the interview I got. And I ended up getting hired there. So I think that's important to point out that the connections you have between people are going to take you a lot further than just a faceless resume that you're pumping out. Some of those, the fish may bite. In my case, I had a 0% success rate. But definitely combine it all and try to use the people you know. The interview process. So I had 2 interviews at 2 different companies. Both were fairly similar. It started with kind of a soft skills interview, more of a screen, seeing your personality, how do you fit in. Once I got past that, we went into a personality assessment, more of a like intelligence abstract problem solving assessment, and then into a code challenge. And after the code challenge, we moved into an in-person interview. And so that consisted of, for me, a fairly strenuous whiteboard session covering my code challenge, basically. What do I know? Do I actually know what I did? Where could it be better? And I got pretty lucky that who would be my future boss was my interviewer. And he eased a lot of my nerves in that because we ended up doing most of the whiteboards side by side. And it was more of a back and forth conversation between us. And pretty soon I forgot I was interviewing, and then we were just talking about code. And then it was over. And I walked out saying, there is no way I got that job. Because I could not keep up. But lo and behold, they did end up calling me and giving me the offer. And talking with them later, I didn't think I did too hot. Why did I end up getting an offer? And it was interesting, the response is not exactly what I expected to hear. They said, well, we're actually looking for 4 things, and none of it included computer science degrees or extreme tech knowledge. It was, they're looking for people with potential, looking for people who are passionate, people who are professional and able to interact in a workplace, and then they really looked for someone who had done projects, so they call it like the 4 Ps. It's sort of something we talked about even this week as we're interviewing new applicants. The biggest part of that being projects. Doing a project, and hopefully you're doing multiple, getting your hands dirty and really getting out there and making mistakes and learning. Every time you build something, you're going to learn something. Even if it fails miserably, you should walk into the second one with something to learn. The metaphor we always use is, if I'm trying to hire someone to build me a house, do I want someone who's only read books about houses, or do I want someone who's actually built houses, or even tried to build houses? And we're always going to look for the builders. And this is something we've talked about currently, and the reason some people actually haven't been getting offers is it's all theory and no application. After that, my advice going into them is know your strengths, which means know your weaknesses implicitly, and be humble. The people asking you a question, they're asking for a reason and they know the answer. If you try to lie and fake your way through and answer it, it's probably going to go poorly. So if you don't know, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. I said that a few times in mine, and it actually led to some great discussion on the whiteboard, and I actually walked out knowing. Continually assess yourself, being introspective, looking at the gaps that you need to fill in both your technical knowledge and your soft skills, because they go right hand in hand. After that, I got hired. This is a live look at me the first few weeks when I started there. It's a huge jump, coming from a boot camp and then actually jumping into a giant enterprise application. When you're writing, I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this, you're writing your own apps, you know what the code looks like, you know where it is, you know what you were trying to do, and all of a sudden there's thousands of lines of code that you didn't write, and you don't know what they were trying to do, and you're going to have to somehow maneuver through it and get done what you need to get done. That, to me, was probably the biggest hurdle. And if you guys get the chance to work with each other and just put your code together, learn from each other, deal with Git, which suddenly is an issue, knowing how that works. Aside from that, it was just drinking from the fire hose. They're just shooting information at you, and you just try and catch what you can. And that doesn't stop. So after those first few weeks, I started to settle in and get a better feel of what my job is like. So my day-to-day is approved. I should probably start out at the top and say, well, what do we do? So we're a e-discovery software as a service company. We're about a mile north of here. It's just a brisk walk away. We provide legal solutions for mostly in-house legal teams. I work on a product called Digital Discovery Pro, and the easiest way I describe it is, so think of Legally Blonde, and all the lawyers are together and they're paralegals, and they have these giant cardboard boxes full of papers for a case, and they need to go through one by one, stick a post-it note on the ones that are important. So the product I work on is a solution for that. So instead of doing that, we take a company's data, we host it securely in the cloud using AWS, and then we provide an interface to do complex queries against it, call down the set, and eventually prepare you for your court case or your outside legal counsel. So for me, I'm a backend developer, mostly on APIs. So my entire day, almost entirely spent in C#. Super important, we learned it here. Luckily, what I learned helped prepare me a lot and give me a jump start into that. But the level that it has to be used, I'm still pushing today, and I fall asleep every night reading C# language internals. Super exciting stuff. We also use AWS. This is a really big buzzword in the industry right now. The cloud is not going anywhere. If anything, it's growing rapidly. AWS, along with 2 other major companies you might recognize, Microsoft and Google, provide cloud solutions. AWS happens to contain the largest market share, and what that allows us to do is leverage a bunch of their tools to not hold a mainframe inside our company, but instead outsource all of that and let Amazon handle all of our service for us. and we work out in the cloud. Other things shouldn't surprise you. I do some database work. It's SQL. Typically nothing too difficult. It's a lot of add a column, backfill some data, put some constraints on. A lot of times you'll be doing joins and queries against it to look at the data in there. Nothing earth-shattering, and then I do much less of this than I did here, but occasionally HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are front ends in Angular. I don't deal much with it, but occasionally I do get a story out there. All right, and then my advice to me, back when I was here, some of the things I wish I knew. It's a marathon, it's not a race. If you are trying to just rush to the end, your muscles will fatigue and you will burn out, I guarantee it. Again, this is something I mentioned earlier, get your hands dirty, do some projects, work together. And one that you probably won't like to hear is however hard you think you should work, double it. The amount of work that goes into it is crazy, but I can stand here and tell you the payoff is worth it. I love my job and I love going into work every day. It's incredible, though if I could tell myself at 1 a.m. trying to figure out how to iterate through an array, then I would go tell myself that. The other piece is about programming in general. Languages are just tools to solve a problem. They're not the solution, and it really doesn't matter which language it is that it's your strength. They all generally do the same thing. What's more important is being able to solve the problems behind it. The goal is for you to have a programming language understood so well that it's become muscle memory, and so when you actually come to a problem, you're thinking about the problem and not how do I instantiate a dictionary in C#. Like, it's more important for you that you know you need a dictionary than how to instantiate it. And that's this next point of focus on concepts, not syntax. You're going to work on a computer. Google is right there. Someone's asked the question before you, and if you're asking a question no one's asked, you're probably wrong. So focus on the concepts. My other advice is to seek out mentorship. The same idea is we don't know everything, and you never will, and that's kind of the beauty of programming. Someone has done it before and someone's done it better, and I found it extremely helpful to seek out mentorship. I'm lucky at Zapproved in particular that they provide a structure around mentorship, so I've been able to work very closely with 2 different senior developers, and they've pushed my learning so much further and faster than I could have done on my own. So whether it's at meetups, people you know, try and seek people out, because you can learn something from everyone, even if you don't expect it. And then the last piece, and Michael and I have actually talked about this a lot, is try to stay well-rounded and maintain your hobbies. Don't lose yourself to learning programming 12 hours a day. Like, you'll learn something, but you're not going to be too happy at the end of it if you've lost yourself in it. Get outside, do the things you like, and you'll find you come back a lot fresher afterwards. All right, and these are the 3 resources I found the most helpful. I feel like I should get paid by these guys because I tout them constantly to people. And I broke them into the 3 pieces of when they helped me. The Web Developer Bootcamp by Colt Steele. This is on Udemy. A lot of times there's a $15 offer for it. I don't usually recommend paid courses, but this one was worth it. This is what I took right after I graduated, and it led me through building some full stack apps, and that helped me put all the pieces together that I learned here. And I think if I had not been doing that after I graduated, continued to learn, I probably would not have succeeded in the interview. The second is Clean Code, and this is right after you start a job. This is to help you keep it. You're working with a lot of different people's code, like I mentioned, and it suddenly becomes very important that your code is maintainable, it's readable, so if someone comes by, they know what you did, and it's scalable. So this is probably a good chance to tell you about my greatest and first failure, and why I wish I knew more about Clean Code. My first feature was given to me, and I was very excited, did not know what I was doing, put it out there. When we tested it, we were using kind of small test data sets, and everything looked great. Got my first feature out, we pushed it out, and immediately bricked a server and dropped the app for our customers. And I remember my boss going, "Have you ever heard of the thread pool?" And I'm going like, "I know a thread, and I know a pool. I don't really know these together." Long story short, Is anyone familiar with threads or tasks? Okay, well basically, when you're programming in C# in particular, well, in computers, we have tasks, and it's essentially a pool that your computer holds of how many things can go off and run this task for you. Go do a job for me. And your CPU is actually what goes and says, hey, thread, go do this job for me. Well, let's say the thread pool is limited at 1,000 per se. We had a customer put in about 1 million documents, and so I said, hey, 1 million threads, go do it. And so I dropped not only one server, but every single server that was running that at the same time. And I lived to tell the tale. Didn't fire me, but learned a lot of valuable lessons, and a lot of it could have been avoided if I was just paying attention to how I was coding, what was going on around it. And then the third, and this can be replaced with really any book, but once you get to a job and you're trying to ramp up how much you can contribute, I found the most important for me was to really do a deep dive into the language I'm using. This can be JavaScript, Java, whatever it is that you're jumping into. It's just adding more toolkits to your belt, and suddenly you're approaching problems and you say, hold on, yeah, I have a tool for that. Because at the beginning, you may know a hammer and a screwdriver, and it's the old saying of when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I did that a lot. Learned a lot of valuable lessons there too.
But deep diving into your language of choice will take you far.
Now I'd like to open up for questions. I am more than helpful, or more than happy to be a resource for you guys. This is my work email, my personal email. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. Hit me with questions. If you're looking to get into Zapproved, we're an awesome company and we are hiring a lot right now, so definitely apply. Yeah, that's it for me, unless you guys have any particular questions you'd like to cover.
So you talked about, like people when they're looking to hire, they look for 4 Ps. One of those was like projects. And when you were like in the tech academy or going forward, did you have projects outside of school that you were working on, or what kind of projects did you do?
I did. I did the live project here. I don't know if you're a student, but the live project afterwards, working with Adam and doing a more advanced, kind of like a secondary live project that helped a lot. Outside of here, I was building apps and trying to get exposure to different pieces. And when I say I do a project, I don't mean you need to create an app and solve world hunger. Like, that's not what we're shooting for. It's just trying to learn something. So the one particular I did was very dumb. There's a free API online. I'd recommend it. It's called Swappy. That's a terrible .com, and it stands for Star Wars API. And basically what it has is a bunch of useless data about Star Wars planets and characters, and it's just a bunch of JSON. It's free to hit. So what I did was create an app in Python that went and hit the API, brought it back, and then I would create data sets and like visualize it with matplotlib and just like create data visualizations of the data it returned. And that was like 15 minutes of my interview, just talking about that. So projects don't just teach you, but they give you a leg to stand on in the interview. Because when you're asked a question and you don't know, at least you have something concrete to fall back on. So you can say, well, in my experience, in this project, I did this. That's what I would recommend. Yeah, definitely do stuff outside. The more you do, the more you get. Yep.
Once you graduate coaching, what do you say is the most important? Networking, doing projects on your own, actually applying for jobs? How would you prioritize it?
That's a tough question. For me, I started and said applying for jobs was the most important. And as you saw, I sent out 10 and I had immediate failure. So I was pretty dejected, and I thought, well, maybe I need to work on my tech skills. And so I went and I just worked on tech. And that's when, out of the blue, my accidental networking is what actually got me a job. So maybe that should serve as a lesson that going to meetups and exposing yourself to different people and ideas is going to be huge. But definitely don't discount me. Those are all 3 very important pillars of getting hired, because you got to send out applications. Yeah. Yeah. It absolutely is. And this is a big part of our team culture. And we talk about it a lot, is
teams are stronger from diversity, and everyone in here switching careers, you're bringing diversity and you're bringing a different skill set. For example, it doesn't matter really what you did. Let's say you were a barista. Well, that doesn't say much about coding skills, but you interfaced with people all day. You were able to get things done fast, and you kept the line moving. You're responsible. I mean, maybe you were a manager and you had managerial skills. All of those things are super valuable to a company. For my personal one, I came from education, so I said a lot about, hey, like I want to be a mentor one day. I'm not ready yet, but when I can learn, I'd like to mentor other people. And now 6 months in, that's exactly what they did. They've asked me to start onboarding the new people. And so if you get hired, chances are I might be the one pair programming with you to start. Everything you do is an asset. Everything you do is an asset in your prior company. Just try to look for transferable skills.
Yep. So you mentioned about the fact that you were supposed to study nights and weekends. Talk a little more, because that's a huge point that you learn a certain amount of skill set via technology. You took additional course to help submit that project, but you're still in a learning process. How much do you spend outside of work helping upgrade your skill sets so you can empower?
All the time. I like to describe it as what I learned at Tech Academy is this really strong foundation. It's kind of like laying down the plot and putting everything on it, but the house you want to build on it, that's on you, because they can only give you the tools to build. You have to build it yourself. So I was doing classes online, doing extra, I was reading books, building things. I thought I was working super hard. I started my job and said, I don't want to get fired, so now I work about twice as hard. And it's doing the same thing. If I see a problem at work, I try to learn from it. I'll go home and try and build my own and learn it, because it's really easy to take code for granted when you start working in an enterprise application. You just assume this works. But the more you know about it, the more you can contribute, the more stories you can take, the faster you can go up the ladder. Yep.
So how did you prepare for your interview? So interview covering soft skills and also the coding challenge, and then more intensive stuff. So, and then I think I must assume you study a lot for their different perspectives.
Yeah, a lot of it was studying. A lot of it's book stuff. What I wish I'd done more of was less reading end to end and more just doing it. But I actually got a lot of help here. I had practice interviews with Michael and Aaron both. I had a practice interview in front of the school here at the time, and so the soft skills piece felt pretty natural. I was already kind of comfortable with the format. Preparing for the interview itself and the code challenge, like I'll have you know, I stayed up all night working on that code challenge because I don't think I built enough to be prepared for it. So my greatest advice would be build, just build, get out there. Even if you're wrong, you're going to learn something.
Your business thing apply what you actually learn.
Definitely. If it's all theory in your head, when it comes to doing it on the whiteboard in an interview, it's going to be hard if you haven't written it before. Yeah. Anyone else?
Answers are all free.
Yeah, I'm here all day.
Did you know you ended up in C# in that particular job, or were you aiming at C#, or were you just sort of like whatever you can give me, I'll take it?
Partially that. Before here, the big buzzword when I was coming out, and I still think it is, was React. So I worked really hard on learning React, getting familiar with a lot of the libraries it uses, combining it with Redux or what have you. So I was feeling much more comfortable in JavaScript when I came on. But it came in and they sort of pointed, there's two paths. There's Angular, which you're not familiar with, and there's C#, which you are somewhat familiar with. If the rank up's going to be the same either way, we need you to work on C#, because it's hard to find C# developers, and they're more in demand, more than you think, especially at our company. So I went the C# route.
During the technical, the whiteboard interview, how spread out were the questions? Did it cover, here's an HTML, CSS, here's a C#, here's a SQL, or did it more focus on just C#?
Mine had no C# actually. So since we did a coding challenge, and hopefully this isn't unique to just us, but they came in to the interview already with a list of things they wanted to talk about my coding challenge, like where it was terrible. where it could be better and where it was good too. And so a lot of my interview was talking about things I've used and do you actually understand them? And Michael talks about this a lot too, is they're going to push the boundaries to see how far you can reach. You don't have to know everything, they just want to see how far you know. So for mine, in particular, the big issue was I had a bad bug in mine where I'm making a bunch of promises to do HTTP requests, and they were coming back at different times. And so the whole premise of mine was, have you ever heard of promise.all? Which basically says, if you have, say, 3 promises going out saying, hey, go do this thing for me, you can actually have a promise.all, which is a promise that sort of wraps these, and it says, all right, once these are all done, then I'll come back and say I'm done. And this would have solved my problem because I was just getting jumbled out of like ordered data sets. And so my interview was, how much do I really know about promises? Because I didn't use this. How much do I really know about HTTP and APIs? Because I have this bug. And then it's, well, can I teach you a better way? And it's being able to learn this on the spot. And I think showing that I was able to keep up and like learn this lesson mid-interview was probably a big piece of it. But HTML, CSS I had none of. It was almost entirely JavaScript and then sort of abstraction problems, code challenge style stuff, like do you spot the pattern in this and how would I fix it in code? And I had one of those, and the rest was on the code challenge. Believe it or not, we are a Windows shop. So I got super lucky because I was a Mac user before I came here, but I got to learn Windows by being here. It really depends on the field you're working in. On a .NET shop, you're probably going to be on Windows. A lot of front-end developers, if you're heading that route, it's more likely to use Mac. I'd suggest being familiar with both. They're really not that different. It's just a difference between like Unix versus MS-DOS. Not really. I mean, you'll learn it on the job. I mean, most of my learning was, I would be familiar with your very basic commands, like in the command line, like Windows says, like, I want to look at a directory, and I'll say dir. While in Unix, like when Mac uses, they say ls. So just like knowing some of the basic ways to maneuver through the command line, it's probably as far as you need to go. Because Windows, you just use the Windows key to maneuver. But in Mac, they use a spotlight, I think. Yeah. Oh, you should be fine then. Yeah. It's the IDE you're going to work in that you'll spend most of your time in and not really the Mac piece. So Visual Studio more so than the computer it's on, at least in my case. Yep. Only Visual Studio. Sometimes I get to write JSON, I'll sneak away into like Atom because I like it better. I'm not supposed to.
Do you have any other resources for like projects? Since you seem to communicate with that such an important part.
Resources for projects? Maybe I should have added this to my book. There's a Python book that I bought, and it's structured around building 3 projects just alongside, and it was like a simple arcade game like you would play in the 80s, like shoot down the aliens. It had like scraping a web page, so like being able to go and read HTML off something and creating a program for that. I can't think of what it's called though, but if you email me, I'll go find it and I'll recommend it to you. But there's a lot of that, a lot of courses out there, particularly the Cold Steel one that I recommended, building apps. Stephen Greiter does ones where you build an app alongside him too. So I'd say start like following someone and then go try and do it yourself.
What color was that book? Do you remember?
What color? It's yellow. It's part of like, has a little robot guy's head on it. It's part of that series of
Python
books.
Crash Course?
Yeah, that is it.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. That book helps me a lot.
Because I'm reading that now, the spaceship sounds familiar.
Yeah, good choice. Yeah, it should help you. I talked about it in my interview. Yeah.
So you did Python as well as courses that you have Python testing?
Yeah, at the time, Python was part of the I'm not sure if it still is.
It's actually, it's the year after the course.
Do it after. Yeah. So at the time, I was doing both Python and C#. I actually like Python better, so. It's saying the same thing in different ways. I think Python's really good for learning kind of abstract ideas. Like if you're having trouble getting used to iterating through things, like for loops are really easy to write in Python, and it could be a good place to learn. But in terms of like actual applications, C# is the way I would go, because that's a lot of jobs out there are Java too, and C# looks kind of similar to Java. So if you're good at it, you could feasibly make a transition into Java as well. Yeah. Yes. I learned React. I think the thing to keep in mind is a lot of these JavaScript libraries and frameworks are buzzwords right now. Like you want to have some familiarity with them. At the end of the day, they're all built in vanilla JavaScript. They do some extra fancy stuff and they let you do more things. But if you don't have a solid foundation in just vanilla JavaScript, it's going to be hard to ramp up into like a big full-fledged thing like Angular or React. So I'd say if you want to go that route, if you're going front end, absolutely. I would get very good at vanilla JavaScript and then move into a framework of choice. Probably go look at job applications and count and see which one do I see the most. And then I'd move that way.
As far as the JavaScript, I felt like I needed more JavaScript after the course,
Mhm.
more advanced JavaScript. Did you do more JavaScript after this, like the
I did.
the HTML, the Angular?
Yeah, the Cold Steel course I recommended does all of that. I also did, there's Team Treehouse. They're also like a local company in Portland. They have a bunch of courses. They did a full stack JavaScript track, and I did all of that too on the side. But a lot of these are post-graduation here. It's just, I'm looking for a job, so I'm going to keep learning while I go. Yeah, I'd recommend both of those, very helpful. They both touch Node and Mongo, stuff like that. Yep.
What resources do you use when you get stuck?
When I get stuck, you'll be on Stack Overflow all the time. Might as well be my best friend at this point. Particularly for C#, I'm in MSDN a lot. It's a lot harder to read than Mozilla's developer network, Indian. If you're on the front end side, you'll probably be in MDN more. Almost always Stack Overflow and MSDN. And if I can't find it there, grab someone. Someone knows.
How far do you know about your AWS folder works? So EC2 or S3 or anything you need to know about your AWS. And
Yeah.
How do you study and then apply for a job?
Alright, so this is a tough question. AWS is extremely complicated. I would say it's kind of like an advanced topic, so at first I would be very comfortable with the languages and writing code, and then I'd look at AWS because that's something a lot more senior developers deal with, which is developing architecture for software. In terms of what we use, just about everything. I mean, we have EC2 instances, we work with queues, so SQS, Simple Queue service. We're an event-driven system. It's a giant concurrent architecture, so we use Simple Notification Service, SNS, that sends messages out. And for like very advanced, you can move into more serverless options, like Lambda is a really big thing coming out now. They offered even more serverless options at reInvent last week. So that's definitely the way the industry is moving. But I would say if you aren't comfortable writing code, I wouldn't jump ahead of the curve yet. Like definitely follow the curve. It'll help you. They have a AWS certified developer. Pretty much anything listed in that we use, except some of the like very kind of out there stuff.
What version control system do you guys use, and how important is it in your job?
Of extreme importance. If you can't do source control, you can't work. We use VSTS, which is Visual CST Services. That's get integrated into Visual Studio. It has problems like anything else, but it's something to be familiar with. A really great place to practice your source control is GitHub. I'm sure you've heard it said here 1,000 times. becoming familiar with pushing code, creating pull requests, doing code reviews. What happens if two people change the same code and we have a merge conflict? Being familiar with all that sort of thing will help you just hit the ground running when you actually get into a company, because they expect you to know. And when I messed it up big time the first week, they let me know that I should know that.
When you crash the server,
Which time?
I worked for HP before. I mean, those big things happen. But did you have a team on backup so that when something happens, there's an instant response?
Yeah, and actually that's kind of the beauty of AWS is they have what's called an auto-scaling instance. And what it is basically they have, let's say these are EC2 boxes. And these are all connected. So these are actual servers sitting on a rack somewhere, in an AWS building. And so what happens is they have like kind of what's called a load balancer. And so when you send a request and you say, hey, I need something to be done, it knows how to disperse it between the different boxes. And so say I knock this one out, which I totally did. These three can pick it up. Unfortunately, mine was so bad, it was kind of like... yeah. We were able to divert it pretty quickly, but yeah, there was an hour of something on fire at AWS that I passed.
So what's the typical day like when you have Zapproved?
I usually come in, try and get caught up on everything that I missed in the last day. Get some work done. We have stand-up in the mornings around 10 a.m. Afterwards, usually a meeting. Unfortunately, I have more meetings than we'd like. Try to get some work done. It's kind of like this battle of you're getting pulled away from your desk and you're trying to stay at your desk as much as you can and get your work done. For me now, I've stopped working by myself so much and having someone help me, and I've moved on to starting helping other people. So my typical day is sitting down, thinking I'm about to get some work done, and someone coming to ask me to help them. But it's usually a combination of just meetings, stand-up, agile scrum kind of deal, and then trying to code as much as you can because it's a limited time frame.
Are certifications important as well? Any kind of certifications?
It doesn't hurt. I know for a fact that some certifications are more helpful than others. And just being certified, again, doesn't mean you know it. We've come across that issue a lot where people come with certifications for, say, AWS, but they had never actually used it. And it became the same problem as they read the book, but they didn't build the house. So a certification is good. It's going to look good on your resume, but if you don't pair it with applicable experience, then it's not going to be super helpful. Because if you have it, they'll ask you about it. Yeah.
Another question for you. When you're now part of the kind of reviewing employees coming on board and helping the interview process, do you guys go look at their GitHub before you interview them?
Sometimes. It depends how far into the pipeline that they get. Once they reach a certain point, they'll go check out the code you've written. We have to do it less so because we force a code challenge, because it's easy. It's hard for us to say that code on GitHub didn't have a lot of outside help. We want to see what's it like with the time constraint. But yeah, your GitHub will get looked at. I know mine did, and the projects I talked about in my interview, they already knew about when I mentioned them. So make sure you have a good README, right? README-MD. Take snapshots, whatever it is, like describe what you did, what you worked on, what it looks like, what it's supposed to do. Because they're not going to delve into every corner of it. Yes?
What are your next goals?
Personally, I'd like to become a mid-level developer. I'm moving that way currently, but to get there for me, I need to move more full stack. I did a lot more JavaScript, HTML, CSS when I was here, but I don't do much on the job. Ideally, I can get a good wrap around that. And so when a story comes in and says, well, hey, I need a user to click this button, and I want it to go through the UI, do all this stuff. I want it to hit an API, do some stuff, save it to the database. I want it to go out here in AWS and do something else. If I can work on every single one of those parts, and I can own a full feature all the way through from top to bottom, then that's sort of the mark of moving into mid-level. So I'd like to get there slowly but surely. Mm-hmm.
So what kind of agile method are you using in Zapproved?
What kind of what?
Agile method.
Agile
Sprint
methods.
or other. And
Yeah.
How do you get used to like working that method?
There's a quick handbook out there. It's like the Agile Scrum Handbook. I'd recommend cruising through it. It took like 30 minutes. Yeah, we do everything in sprints. At the end of every sprint, we're doing a retrospective. I literally ran out of mine today to come here. Everything is based on iterative, and it's a big thing that you hear a lot. It's things don't have to be perfect the first time. We're going to iterate on it and just improve it piece by piece. And you'll hear fail fast a lot, which is another big piece of Agile Scrum, because the idea of what Agile Scrum is kind of like you as a company are on a ship and you're going across the ocean. Well, you don't really cut a straight line. You're kind of like moving across because there's wind, there's storms, and the idea is, well, I just hit a huge storm here. We need to be able to turn the ship fast and go a different way. And so failing fast is something you'll see a lot, because if you do something and it's not going to happen, we need to shift. And our team does that a lot. It's a lot of reevaluating where you're heading. Yes?
So, how much of your time is spent coding?
How much time do I spend coding? Like at work or?
Yeah.
I used to do probably about 7 hours at work when I first started. And a lot of that is like me go sit, go ask someone a question, they explain, I'm like, okay, go sit down and say, I don't know what he said. That's kind of how it starts. It's a big piece of that, and you code a lot in the beginning, and we kind of break everything up into what we call like low-hanging fruit. And so when you come in, you're not gonna be taking like these crazy complicated features, developing them. We're like, hey, go fix this bug. We need to make a tweak over here. The customer didn't really like this. Let's change this. Doable stories. As I started to move out of those, I tend to find I have less time. I probably code about 4 hours a day now, but I'm kind of proxy coding through other people, so it still feels pretty similar.
Garrett, do you have like a certain time limit, that you can spend on a problem before you go to a team member? I mean, does Zapproved have like a guideline that you have to follow, or?
We do. We have a strict rule. 15 minutes. If you sit and spin your wheel for 15 minutes, you've looked at Stack Overflow, you've looked at MSD and NDN, you've looked at some people's solutions, you sat there and thought about it, and you haven't found something, it doesn't help anyone for you to spin your wheels. Like, the idea is we want to break you out of that so you can keep rolling again, because learning and work stops whenever you get stuck. We have this saying, it's like, if you don't ask the question, it won't get answered. And it's a big part of our work culture is accountability. If you haven't said anything, that something's wrong, everyone's going to assume it's okay, and when something blows up, it's on you. So 15 minutes. I still do it today. I probably asked 8 questions this morning. Even around here, like if you are struggling to find something, it's not going to help you to spin your wheel for an hour. If someone knows, may as well get the answer fast. But do give it a chance first.
I was gonna say, because you probably spend, when you go to that person with a question, you go with, here's what I've tried, here's what I've done,
Exactly.
here's what I've tried to do, and figure it out. So you've already done due diligence
Mm-hmm.
and yours. How many times have you been stuck and you actually, it was something that was very Zapproved specific, there was a solution they had done that you would not have known the answer?
It happens a lot, actually, especially in the back end where things are complicated. Someone wrote it 2 years ago. They were solving a problem that no one remembers. And it's just back there, and you're looking at it going like, I'm trying to follow the logic, and it doesn't really make sense here. It happens a lot more than you think. And so what I tend to say is like, here's what I think is happening. Here's what I think we should do. Can you tell me if I'm wrong? It's a lot of that.
it just seems like there's a lot of times when you research and try to figure it out, but there's no way you're going to know how to fix it. It's the implementation that's approved is done. There's no way that you know based on the language and understanding the language.
I have a specific example. This happened recently. I'm looking at code, and it supposedly sends an email, and I see nothing sending an email. Like, it's just not here. Like, I don't think it's happening. And like, I spun my wheels, did not listen to my 15-minute rule, tried to figure it out, and I eventually was like, look, I don't think this is happening. He's like, oh, well, when it does this, and it adds it into S3 where we store data in AWS, yes, it sends an email. Are you serious? It's like, yeah, it's one line. You just have to put this word in. Oh. Cool. There goes my morning. Yeah. So, yeah, be proactive and ask. No one's going to help you if you don't go seek it.
How's the, you talk about the culture as improved, you're very collaborative. Have you had any challenges, any challenges on the soft skill side of the house, which is really important. Have you had any challenges when you're able to work through a challenge and get through it, that you can share?
That's a tough question. I mean, it's kind of always a test because developers are made up of a really varied group of people. Some people want to have their headphones on all day and don't want to make eye contact with you. Some people want to come stand at your desk and chat about breakfast, and you're like, I want to get work done. So soft skills always come into play. I think there's a big misconception that software developers are like locked in a dark room at the back of the company and we just like make code, and it's not the case. Lights are on. Occasionally have windows. You're constantly interfacing with different people from different backgrounds. I mean, for my team specifically, we have like former teachers, we have former baristas, we have senior developers who've been doing it for 20 years. We have people who switched in from all different walks of life, and so they all approach problems in the workplace in different ways. And so you have to be flexible. And that was one of the hardest things to learn, because especially here, like I can sit and focus on a problem as long as I want, but when you get into a workplace, someone's going to be pulling you in a different direction all the time.
What about
culture question? When you said if you can't solve a problem in 15 minutes, you ask. I've worked at HP and Tektronix among other places,
cool.
and there they have some really eccentric people.
Sure.
Particularly when they have the title fellow. Sometimes they think by themselves.
Right.
So how do you balance those two? I mean, I actually enjoy being around those people who sometimes think individually, but sometimes as a team. But the question goes for days sometimes.
Sometimes it does. And a lot of times asking in that instance, because we do experience those where no one really knows the answer, but asking the question gets more people thinking about it, and a lot of times it'll result in a meeting where we sit around a whiteboard and just like talk it out, and maybe it does take days, but I would say the conversation with the whiteboard wouldn't start if someone didn't prompt it. But yeah, it's a fine balance, and you have to know who to ask. Some people are more approachable than others. Some have very fancy noise-canceling headphones. My mentor in particular.
I've got a question. How do you do like documentation and commenting and things like that? Do you have time to do that, or is there somebody who actually does that after all the work gets done?
In what sense of like adding comments to the code, explaining what it's doing, or is it more providing documentation for customer-facing people to push out?
Well, I would say probably it's more important to get in the code so that somebody who has to come back behind you actually has a clue where to start.
Definitely. There is some of that. We have a rule that says if you have to write a comment to tell what your code's doing, that should be a sign that something's going on here. So we try to write code that speaks for itself most of the time. That you want your code to be self-documenting. So we say, and they talk a lot about that in clean code. You guys ever read the book, which means like accurate variable names, explaining like the variable name should tell you what's going on with this piece, and when it does get a little crazy, because something that's complicated, yeah, we do put comments in there. And usually when you open up a document and you see a big comment, you're like, uh-oh. Alright, well, let's step through it. Because, yeah, comments are there when something is complicated enough to earn it. Yes?
What do you wish you knew before you started?
In what sense?
Like the first week at work, what do you wish you had known beforehand, how to do it all over again?
For me, it's probably, I think I talked about earlier, like being humble enough to know when I don't know things. I came in thinking I knew a lot of things, and I didn't, still don't. And I kind of like stumbled at the beginning because I had really high expectations that I'd go in and just like start crushing code, and went in and they were like, hey, go fix this bug in CSS, and I was like, I can't find it. I don't even know where the CSS files are. So I wish I'd come with more humility in terms of like technical skills. I wish I'd had more practice thinking about what it means to work on an enterprise solution. A lot of times when we write apps, it's in a vacuum. You know, maybe I sent it to my mom and she was like, good job, son. And that's the one person who looked at it. But when you're working at a business level, I mean, thousands, millions of people could use it. And thinking about what that means, and I'm working with other people on a giant piece of code, even if it's split in pieces, and it could potentially have millions of people using it. And I didn't come in with that mindset, and it was a big hurdle to jump over. Anyone else?
I think that's fine. One more.
Okay.
So obviously the company's different, but how does Zapproved deal with getting results? Like, I mean, how do they really, how do you know, how do they give feedback to you to know that you're meeting the expectations in your work?
Super lucky on this one. My boss is very, very big on feedback. Part of our company culture is what we call radical transparency, and that's every single person in the company should know what you're up to, and there should be no question about who's doing what and what work's being done. We actually have weekly one-on-ones with either mentor or boss, sometimes both, and we discuss like, how did the sprint go? Where was it good? Where was it bad? What do you need to do to get better? Where do I see you going? And it's always like, first, are we on the career track that you want for the next 5 years? That's always the first question. Yes? All right, well, let's talk about the last 2 weeks. And it's sort of like an agile mini retro, but a one-on-one with very direct feedback sometimes. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank Garrett for coming and talking to us. Just in case you didn't know, Zapproved, the company he works for, the CEO got Entrepreneur of the Year from the Tech Association of Oregon.
She's
awesome.
incredible.
Great. I met with her a couple weeks ago, I think it was, and yeah, they're fantastic business. So this is an excellent resource. Get his contact information and use it. Is that okay if they use it?
Come talk to me now. I wanted to get to know you guys.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you so much, Garrett, and let's give him a big hand.
I forgot to stand in front of that.
That's okay.
Sorry.
Those be your head chops off.
You got it?
Feel free to go and ask any questions you're afraid to ask in one-on-one.